folks, thanks for joining me today. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make your own rocks. Now, if you live in a climate like I do, this time of year, the rocks are covered in snow, so this is a great alternative. First, we're going to need a regular kitchen scale. Then you're going to need your molds. I purchased this one from the Happy Dotting Company. She's got many different shapes and sizes to choose from, so I'll put a link in the description below to her Etsy shop. Then we're going to use Ultracal 30 as our medium for mixing it. This is very, very strong when it becomes dry and is heavy like a rock. Then you're going to need a mixing bowl. Now this mixing bowl should be dedicated to just mixing the Ultracal 30. I also use a plastic palette knife to stir things up, and it's easy for cleanup. And of course you're going to need your water. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is grab my handy dandy cheat sheet from the Happy Dotting Company. She has all of her molds listed that she has available in her Etsy shop, gives you the final dimensions of once the rock has hardened, as well as your mixing quantities. She also has these listed in ounces and in grams, so it's easy for anyone to follow. And I really like that the pictures are in color so that her molds match whatever you have in stock. Next, you want to make sure that your work surface is clean. You want to make sure that it's free of dust, any pet hair, anything like that that could get into your mixture, because it can cause an issue during the curing process. So what I do is I just do a quick wipe out on the bowl, and I wipe down my palette knife, and then I'm ready to go. I put the bowl onto the scale prior to turning the scale on. This way, the bowl weight will not be incorporated in the calculations for my Ultracal 30 and water ratio. So then I turn on the scale and it shows me 0. My scale comes in grams and in ounces, but automatically goes to ounces, so I will be switching it over to grams. Once the bowl is on the scale and I have zeroed it out, I'm ready to start mixing. So I like to have all of my supplies ready to go so I can get right into it. First thing I need is my handy dandy cheat sheet from the Happy Dotting Company, and I find the mold that I'm using, which is mold number 2. I scroll across and I see that the mixing quantities are 3.35 grams of water to 8.8 ounces of powder. Now I'm going to be doing it in grams, so that's 95 grams of water to 250 grams of powder. But here's the kicker. I'm going to do a double batch, so I need to times that by 2. So I need 190 grams of water to 500 grams of powder. So then I start measuring it out and get mixing. When working with Ultracal 30, I do recommend wearing a mask. It can get rather dusty, and you don't want to breathe that stuff in when you're mixing. So I start mixing with an old measuring spoon, and I just keep putting spoonful after spoonful until I get to the amount that I need. Now this does take a little while when I'm only using a tablespoon and I need 500 grams, but I do get there. If you find that this video was helpful and informative, please hit that thumbs up for the like. You can also subscribe, as well as click that bell so you can get notifications when I post new videos. If there's any questions that I haven't covered and you're curious about, please leave me a comment below. I have been making rocks this way for about 3 years now. I have tried other mediums, but I just don't find they have the same consistency as Ultracal 30. Ultracal 30 is very easy to mix. It mixes up very evenly, pours nicely into the molds, and within a few hours you can demold them for them to cure for the next 3 to 4 days. So I continue to fill up the bowl 1 tablespoon at a time, and eventually I do get to the 500 grams. That's what I need to make my double batch. I think I went a little bit over. Yeah, so I just scoop out a little bit to bring it back down to the 500 grams. It's very important to mix this to the correct ratio so you have the exact amount that you need for the molds. Okay, so now that we have our 500 grams of powder, what we need to do is prepare it for adding the liquid or the water. So what I like to do is, if anybody's as old as I am, remember how to make pancakes from scratch. So what you do is you make a little funnel or like a volcano in the middle of the powder and you're ready to go. Don't forget to reset your scale so that it's back to zero. And we need 190 grams of water. That's because I'm doing a double batch. So once the scale's been reset, then we're ready to pour the water. I pour the water in slowly. This is the stage where you're going to get the most dust particles from the Ultracal 30 when you're mixing the water in with the powder. I pour it into the funnel that we created into the powder, all the time watching the scale, making sure that I don't go over 190 grams of water. It's very hard to correct that ratio by adding powder once the water has been added. See how quickly the powder is eroding into the water? This is what I really like about this Ultracal 30. It's also bubbling right now because there's air trapped underneath in the powder, and the water is getting into those areas and pushing that air out. Once the water starts to get into those areas and the bubbles start to slow down, this is when I like to get out my spatula and start mixing it. But again, I mix slowly. I just want to say that this is how I like to do it. It's not the right or the wrong way to do it. It's just my preference. So now what I like to do is I take the dry areas that are still on top and I fold them over into the water so that the water can get in behind and through all of the other areas that haven't been saturated with water just yet. And as you can see, it is still pretty thick, and we've got to get that down to the consistency of yogurt or a pancake mix. I continue to just fold it over and turn it over and do a little bit of a stir. And what I like about this palette knife that I use is that it's got an edge on it. So I can get into the creases in the bottom of the bowl, scrape the bottom, and I can do along the sides. This way, if there's any kind of dry powder left that's been trapped by air, I can get it out. And I want to make sure that the consistency is pretty smooth with not a lot of lumps or clumps in it. So I continue just sort of swishing back and forth, scraping the sides, scraping the bottom, making sure that there is no air left or trapped in the bottom. And I keep checking my consistency. This is starting to look really good. It's a little bit like pancake mix, which is what I want. And I think, oh, there's a lump, so I got to stir a little bit more. And I want to get as many of those lumps out as I can because even though they don't really make a difference once they're poured in, but I just like to have that nice consistency. So I'm checking it again. It looks really good. So I think I'm just about ready to pour into my molds. So I remove my scale. I don't need that anymore, and I bring my molds in. So I have two molds. They're the same size molds, and I purchased them both from the Happy Dotting Company. And the bowl that I use has a pour spout on it, which is really nice because I can control the speed and direction. So I pour it in slowly and in the center. This allows that if there's any air bubbles that are being trapped, they're going to be pushed to the side of the mold and I'll be able to tap them out later. I'll show you that in a little bit. As I'm pouring, I'm noticing that there are some clumps that are going in. That's totally okay because the amount of water that is in the mixture is going to continue to saturate the powder and you won't have any lumps at all when it comes time to demolding. I don't fill the molds completely to the top, at least not yet. I'm leaving a little bit of space so that when I tap the molds, that any trapped air bubbles can escape. They will come up along the sides of the molds and come out that opening. This is also the moment you're going to find out just how level your surface is. Anyways, so we're going to tap along the sides of the molds, just on the outside, lightly tapping, going all the way around. This will bring the air bubbles that are trapped or stuck to the sides up to the top. In reality, though, what you're looking at is the bottom of the rock. So if you have air bubbles that come up and they pop and they'll leave a little bit of a divot, that's okay. This is the bottom of the rock. Nobody looks at the bottom of the rock. Oh, there's a little air bubble there, so I just used my nail to pop it. It was a big one, and so I don't want that there. Once they cure, the air bubbles do pop and they leave little divots. Now that's why we're tapping. We don't want these little divots on the front surface of our rock. We want them on the bottom. No one looks at the bottom anyways, so if you have divots there, not a big deal. So I slowly tap away on both of the molds, going around and tapping and bringing those air bubbles up. And that way it comes to the top through that little bit of opening space that I left, and they come up to the top. So I continue to tap. I use different tapping methods, and I think I'm just about ready. Yep. So I grab my bowl with the excess mixture that's in it, and I bring it over to the molds, and I slowly pour into the mold just to bring it to the top. I use my palette knife to slowly push a little bit at a time into the mold. I do not want to create any more air bubbles because I just spent all that time tapping to get the air bubbles out. So this now closes that gap that I left before, so there's no more room for air bubbles to be able to escape. So this is, I'm filling it up to the top, and what happens is once it's cured, this gives you a nice flat surface on the bottom so that you can put your rock on it and you can work on the top without it rolling around. So now that we're finished, we can put this aside and wait for it to cure. In about 4 hours, we can come back and demold. It's a good time for cleanup. So here we are 4 hours later and ready to demold. So all you do is slide one edge of the mold over. Because they're silicone, they're very flexible. And you can pull your rock out. Now you will notice that the temperature is actually warm. That's because it is still curing. It's a dark color. You'll know when it's finished curing when it has turned white.